Welcome to the 12th District. This is Kerry Condata reporting for NCW Life. We are in the middle of, or getting near the middle of the session in Olympia. We'll be visiting with our legislators later in the program. We'll have a bit of an extended version with them because so many things are happening. We are approaching what's called the first cutoff. This is where the policy bills need to be out of committee or they die. That's the end of their movement. And a week from now, we'll have the fiscal cutoff where the monetary bills have to be done. So the Appropriations Committee will be going into overdrive and working extended hours next week. Mike Steele is on that committee. He'll talk a little bit about that. We had hoped to have John Wise today from Washington, D.C. for you. Unfortunately, we couldn't make that scheduling work. We will try to get him back on next week and find out exactly what's going on in D.C. When we come back, we will give you a little overview of that and some other state issues that are happening here and around the United States. We'll be right back with the news, and just shortly we'll have your legislators on for an extended session. It's time to go in session with the 12th District. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 12th District. Well, we were hoping to have John Wise live from Washington, D.C. this week, but unfortunately his schedule did not allow him to call in. So we will try to catch up with him next week and see what's really going on at the heart of some of the federal issues. We know right now the big story is the wall, of course, and the emergency declaration from the president, but even larger, looming over everything, is the Chinese trade talks. This is really putting the stock market and other economic issues kind of on hold. People are uncertain about which way this is going, but right now the word is that we are making progress. We have a March 1st deadline looming, which could install a lot of new tariffs on Chinese goods, could create a second level of tariffs. Also, there is talk again of adding tariffs to imported cars, could be coming up in March. So we hope that these trade agreements are resolved and that they are resolved in good favor. It looks good. We're hearing good things. We'll see what happens. The president meets with the North Korean leaders again this week, and that is going to be very interesting to see where that has been. It's been kind of quiet, and it'll be nice to get an update and see where we stand with North Korea. The economy, meanwhile, even though things are kind of on hold with the Chinese trade agreement, it still roars along. The jobless benefits came in at one of the lowest numbers in a long time, 216,000 people now receiving unemployment benefits. That's a very, very low number. And the Supreme Court decision last week was on excess forfeiture is very interesting, something we've talked about in Olympia quite a bit on forfeiture of assets over drug deals. They came down pretty hard on the police departments across the United States for excess forfeitures, and that is going to shake some folks up on how they do business in the law and order. Well, a couple of years ago, I coined a term, the unintended consequences of market manipulation. And the fact is, we have a couple of stories here that are certainly reflecting that exact law, which I call it a law because it happens almost inevitably when you mess with the market. Now, what does that mean? Well, Oregon State is going to be the first state, it looks like. The bill is moving quickly through to create rent controls statewide. There will be no opt-outs. There will be no adjustments for cities or counties. This is a statewide rent control. Of course, they claim there's a panic situation because rents are so high. Unfortunately, they're doing absolutely nothing to increase the amount of housing, to change regulation, or to prompt people to build homes. So instead, they're going to put rent controls on, which in the past have been a total failure. As soon as rent controls go on, it makes it less attractive to build more homes. You're just making the situation worse. And of course, landlords start skimping on fixing things up and spending money on their facilities and this kind of thing. Frankly, it's been tried a number of times in cities and across the United States, and it has failed miserably every time it's been tried. The unintended consequences will be terrific on this particular program, although Seattle is looking at the same type of thing with rent controls. Folks, it's a basic economic formula, supply and demand. We need to build more homes. We have more people coming. As a matter of fact, Oregon State was just listed as the second state in growth now in the country. It's the second fastest growing state with people coming from all over the United States because of all the wonderful things Oregon has to offer, from the coast to the mountains to the recreation, of course, the climate. And so they have decided to go with the rent controls. I hope Washington State does not do the same. In a very similar unintended consequences story, which we've talked about a number of times, the minimum wage bill back in New York, a $15 minimum wage in the city of New York, has created all kinds of repercussions and problems. First of all, people were cut, their hours were cut, their schedules were changed, and so a law was put in, a preemptive scheduling law. So again, we had to make a law to deal with the first law that was dealing with the change in the market. And what happened is suddenly, instead of people getting their hours changed and all the issues that came with that and not changing and paying time and a half, well, guess what? They were firing people. And so that can't happen. So now the third law in New York that's being talked about and probably passed is removing at-will firing. So in other words, you cannot fire anyone for any reason unless it's a very, very good reason, and you probably have to go before a board or have an explanation of why you're firing that person. Folks, this is the unintended consequences of market manipulation. When you try to change something artificially, when government tries to manipulate the economy, there are always repercussions, and they are usually negative, and these two stories certainly point that out. We believe that same problem is occurring in Seattle. They have tried preemptive scheduling, and I would suspect they will try to get rid of at-will at some point too. None of this would be necessary in a regular market situation. Coming back closer to home on some of the state issues we'll be hearing about shortly, we'll have our legislators on in just a few minutes. They'll be covering a few of these issues, but there were some bills that passed. One of the big ones this week is Smoking 21. This has been debated for several years. I was involved in that debate several times, and they have finally passed that bill off the House floor after 3 years of attempting to get it out of the House, which moves the smoking age, legal smoking age, to 21, and for vape to 21. A very controversial bill because we seem to have different age requirements for different things. We're moving the gun ages around, we're moving the smoking ages around, but yet we're talking about lowering the voting age. I think Keith will talk about that in the interview. So a big bill that took 3 years to pass. We assume it is going to the governor's desk, and Washington will be a 21-year-old smoking state. I don't think it's going to have a lot of effect because all that product will still be available. Kids get what they get. We could certainly we've banned alcohol for under 21. We've banned lots of things, and typically it hasn't been that effective, but that's where Washington is going. Also, a bill that will ban billboards for cannabis operations. This is another one that's been debated since the cannabis retail business started here in Washington State. One of the most major complaints is about the billboards. A couple of years ago, I was involved in changing the billboard law so that the type of advertising that went on those billboards was extremely limited. One of the reasons we allowed billboards was because they don't have really any other way to advertise. We have a very strict advertising prohibition on cannabis dealers, even though the state's making a ton of money on it. They keep them very tightly regulated, and no advertising for the most part is allowed. So the billboards were allowed, but number of complaints were so high that the bill finally has passed to eliminate the billboards. We don't know if that'll get to the governor's desk, but I think there's a good chance it will. Well, when we return, we'll be talking to your state legislators. A little bit of an extended interview today because so much is going on. Thousands of bills, I didn't say hundreds, thousands of bills have been filed and are moving through the system. And they are moving to the floor and starting to vote these bills off the floor, as we discussed earlier. And it is getting very hot and very exciting down there. A lot of really very, I would say, questionable bills are getting out of committee. Ones that have not been able to move, that are very controversial, are moving out of committee. We'll see how far the lifespan goes. So we will return with Mike and Keith from Olympia when we come back to the 12th District in session. Back, ladies and gentlemen. Well, things are heating up in Olympia. We're getting to the first cutoff. Floor sessions are starting to happen, and we're happy to have both of our legislators on board today. Mike Steele, Keith Gaynor. Tell us what's happening in Olympia.
Well, it's been a hugely busy week. As you know, Kerry, we're racing toward cutoff. We actually, in one committee setting, exec 22 bills in education in one committee setting. It was an incredible sprint.
Yeah, that is wild. I don't think I've seen that in a long time.
And that's what's happening in my committees too. But we also got schedules for next week, which I know Mike has some very long days ahead of him, and I do too, but not quite like Mike's schedule.
We'll be heading into fiscal cutoff next week, of course, Kerry, and you know what it's like to serve on appropriations. So those are ahead of me.
I sure do. Well, I could, yeah, this will remind people, this is a policy cutoff this week. Fiscal cutoff is a week out, and that's when appropriations goes into overdrive. You'll be spending a lot of hours. We don't really have budgets yet. What are we doing in appropriations right now, actually?
Well, I can tell you that the chair tells us that we'll be executing probably over 100 bills a day next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. To give folks a sense of what that schedule looks like, we'll start at 1:30 afternoon on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and go clear until midnight or 1 a.m. Is what the chair is preparing us for on those 3 days, and then all day Thursday, clear into what he expects to be 2 or 3 a.m. on Friday morning.
Good heavens. Okay, Keith, what about your side? What's going on in your committees?
Well, my committees, we're going to have longer sessions too, particularly in transportation. The schedule has us having at least 5-hour sessions, so it'd be just a matter of what comes out. But we've been doing a lot right now as far as getting the bills passed. Tomorrow, I guess today will be our last day for transportation, so we have a number on the agenda for today to exec out.
Okay. Well, on my laundry list, it looks like Smoking 21 has passed the floor. Can you tell us a little bit about that debate and how that went?
Well, there was the debate, and it wasn't unanimous. I think both of us voted yes. And the reason I voted yes, I have some fundamental concerns just about the age itself, because it'd be nice to have a bright line of what the age of majority is for everything actually. And yet, when you have an activity that encumbers society, down the road, I just felt like to delay that purchase time is a prudent thing to do.
Yeah, I think Keith articulates it well. One of the things that we will hear coming up here in session, which I have fundamental trouble with, is if we are agreeing that we need to move the smoking age to 21 and then hear bills where we want to move the voting age to 17, why the disparity? If you're smart enough to vote at 17, then maybe you should be able to buy cigarettes. But if you're not able to buy cigarettes till 21 because you're not smart enough at 17, then let's hold true to that line. And that's really kind of how I was looking at it. If 21 is the age of maturation, then 21 is the age that y'all should be able to make informed decisions.
Well, that seems like the consensus when you look at the debates on social media and such, that there is a disparity between different things and different ages, and it would be nice to see it lined up. Next up, the governor's one of the governor's directives, the death penalty. Has that been voted out of committee yet?
The death penalty has come out of the Senate. They have voted it off the Senate floor. We have not seen it here in the House move, so at least not that I'm aware of.
Okay. One interesting one for our area was the repeal, a 1639 repeal bill. I know that's been actually getting a little traction. Did that really get out of committee?
I know it's been proposed, and again, because of their schedules this week with our own committees and the incredible amount of volume, I just haven't been able to track other committees as we will have some time to in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think you're going to be seeing a lot of this stuff, and I know a lot of the actions happening on the Senate side. Also, one of the questions that's asked around here is about daylight savings time, and quite a debate going on about that. What do you see happening there?
Well, it's actually, we will be voting on it in our state government committee. And, it's just a matter of whether you want to see a change or not. I know that, staying on standard time, if we're going to stay, that's where I would like to be. But I think, to not have to change back and forth would be good. But if we go with the daylight savings time, we would need a federal, waiver on that.
Oh, okay.
So the bill's continuing to be monitored and move. It is still moving, so we'll see what the committee does with it here in the House.
So which way is this particular bill aiming? Is it going to daylight savings time? Is that the proposal that's on the deck?
Yes, staying on daylight saving time year round.
Okay, so if that bill got through to the governor's desk, there would have to be some federal intervention to let it happen. Okay, I know there's been a lot of tremendous amount of interest. Another bill that I've seen 1,000 times, the public records bill. Keith, you might be able to address that. I understand that is maybe not be moving. There's been so many attempts to try to figure out public records and to cover the cost of that. You know that from firsthand experience.
Right.
What is the latest on public records?
Well, for the last 2 weeks, it's been on hold. It's been on the agenda to be voted on, to vote out of committee, and then we come to it to do the vote, and then we say, well, we're holding that. So it's still on hold at this point.
Okay. Last but not least on this laundry list anyway is vaccinations. We have a measles outbreak in Clark County. I know it's been a debate down there for all the years that I've been there about mandatory vaccines. What is happening? I know you're not on the healthcare committees, but do you know anything, what's happening on that?
Yeah, so the vaccine bill that we were hearing in the House potentially was related to measles, mumps, and rubella. That was all it was related to, is making this sort of a mandatory vaccination happen with those specific ones. That bill is now dead. It's not going to make it out of the House. The one that they say may have some life is vaccines in total, and that'll just, have everybody up in arms. If we couldn't make it through the process with a smaller subset of just measles, mumps, and rubella, I struggle to see how we're going to make a larger bill that would encompass all vaccines move out of the state legislature.
Okay, well, as we move to the fiscal situation, we're getting out of policy and into fiscal. Do you see any of the tax proposals getting any traction anywhere over there? We've had a capital gains proposal. We've had a number of different tax proposals, B&O increase on services. Do you see any of this stuff moving?
Well, I think what the philosophy is going to be, Carrie, is they're going to come up with the expense side of the register first and say, okay, here's everything we want to spend, and then they're going to find the finances to do it. So that's I think that's several weeks, in my opinion, down the road, because they're still busy building their laundry list of expenditures.
Yeah, it sounds like budgets are, about 3-4 weeks out. And is it House first or Senate first this year?
It's House first this year.
Okay, so for the viewers, the House will come out with a budget. Of course, the governor already put out his budget, which was a real eye-popper. And then the House will come out with a budget, the Senate will come out with a budget, and then you guys all get to try to rectify all that. And like you said, in the meantime, they're going to be looking for some revenue, but we haven't seen a lot happening there yet.
So one of the things that has happened when people have come in, and there's been a lot of really well laid out and articulated well as to the reason to have certain programs and all. And like I told most people, it's, I may be supportive of the program. It does meet needs, but the reality is somehow it has to balance up with the priorities of the budget. And we really are not having a whole lot of input as to what those priorities are. So, I think people have to have an understanding that, as good as the program may be, if it, has a budgetary impact and it's just not rising to the level of the priority of funding, it won't happen.
Well, and I think you have to also be very careful. Mike knows this about the bow wave, looking forward. Right?
Thanks for bringing that up, Carrie, because that really is what's informing through our capital budget negotiations. You're probably going to see a lot of the design phase of these projects put on hold because of that bow wave. So if you have a project and we've got a request for some design money in this first phase, likely this year we're in this biennium, we're going to hold off on funding any new design because we're just busy trying to keep up with current capital construction. And we don't have the capacity to start much new.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I know you're very busy right now. I'd like to just let you wrap up with anything we might have missed or any other hot items that are happening over there. We'll be starting to talk more about the budget over the next few weeks as it develops. But right now, policy is the king of the situation. And is there anything we missed that we should know about?
Not that I'm aware of. There are, as the bills come to the floor, there will be some floor amendments that may tweak the bills a little bit. And that sometimes is a little bit problematic too, because you've already debated a bill. You may be okay with it or not. And then, now what is that amendment going to do? What will be the impact? So there is always a chance that there may be some change in support for a particular bill, but that's something that we just have to really stay on top of.
Yeah, and I would say that because it is policy cutoff, we had our own bills make it out of committee. One that I'm really happy to see move that didn't move last time around was my housing bill that created a remittance program through the general fund sales tax that allows these local jurisdictions to apply for that remittance and use it for infrastructure and housing. So I was glad to see that move out of the committee with only one no, and now it's on to getting it off the floor. So I'm excited to see some of our own policy bills move.
So going along with the housing, there is a bill that's out there right now with ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and that's one that I'm concerned about because what it does is the state mandates that cities have to have that as a part of their planning process. And as I know from my experience, cities have already had that opportunity to do it. Some cities have done it and have allowed for housing opportunities, but I strongly believe that, the local governments should have the opportunity to plan for their own communities.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I got to tell you, the housing situation is still a major problem. I'm glad to see there's some things moving. Mike, congratulations on getting that bill forward. Both doing a stellar job. It's tough over there, I know. I'm hearing it from some of your colleagues have been actually calling me. I actually got to work on a bill this week in the cannabis area.
All right.
And got it out of committee from over here, so I've still got a little influence. But anyway, great to have you. We'll be back next week. We'll have a little bit more on this budget. I know with the Appropriations Committee next week might be tough, but we'll see if we can squeak in the time and see what's going on in those long sessions. Thanks, gentlemen. See you next time.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you, Kerry.
All right, there you have it, your legislators from Olympia. We'll be right back. Well, that's about a wrap for today on the 12th District. As you can see, things in Olympia are really getting exciting. We're going to be following it each and every week moving forward. One of the bills that is very interesting in Olympia right now, and well, there's several bills, but a movement is for the 51st state. As you have heard, we did a show on it, and we've actually looked at this. The ability for Eastern Washington to break off and become a 51st state sounds like it's far-fetched, but the fact is it's starting to gain more and more traction and more interest from people. And it is getting the attention of folks on the west side as well. They are establishing team leaders in every county and some cities. And this project is a little bit more advanced than what most people thought would happen. So we'll see. We'll be following it. We'll try to find one of those local leaders on the 51st state. It's called the Liberty State Movement, and see if we can get an interview with somebody who's right at the front edge of that discussion. In the meantime, we'll be coming back each week with information from Olympia and across the world. This is the 12th District in session. I am recovering politician Kerry Condata, happy to be with you. I hope you're keeping an eye on our NCW Life news as well at 5, 6, and 10 o'clock. Local news you just can't get anywhere else, right here on the NCW Life channel, your local connection to our community. We'll be back next week with the 12th District.